Yeah, it's lab day. Isn't that fun? Okay, so some of it's lab, some of it is like looking through and making a microscope slide and looking at onion cells and cheek cells. We are going to really focus today on using a model to identify key differences between plant and animal cells based on structure and function. So you're actually going to do a lab that where you look at plant cells, and you're going to look at onion cells. They're really awesome. If we have access to microscopes, we'll make our own slides. If we don't, then you'll just have to look at pictures of what it looks like. If when you look through a microscope at a slide, they look right close up. It's super cool. So our plant cell example is going to be an onion skin cell. And our animal cell example will be a human cheek cell. And what they do to get cheek cells from humans is you just have to take a toothpick, rub it on your cheek, and then you rub it on a slide and you look at it right close up with a microscope. It's pretty cool. If the microscopes are any good, you will, oh, excuse me for doing that, but my eyeball itched. When you see an animal cell or an onion cell up close, you're looking for some basic parts. And the first parts you're going to see are like a cell membrane or a cell wall. And then you're going to see the nucleus. Those are the most obvious. If there are other cell parts that you can't see, it's because they're too small for the microscope to actually pick up, right? Because remember, cells are super small. So today you're going to look at plant cells and animal cells, and you're going to complete this table by adding 3 to 5 more details in each column. So you're going to compare plant cells and animal cells. I normally would do this like a Venn diagram, but those are super hard to draw, so I didn't make you draw one. And then here, I would like you to draw what an onion or a plant cell looks like under a microscope. Just do your best, and I would highly suggest using colored pencils. Color always helps. And then here, I would like you to draw what a human or an animal cheek cell looks like under a microscope, so that you have an actual picture of a plant and an actual picture of an animal cell to compare, which will definitely help. You can also print these out and cut and paste if you want from your computer at home. I'm not going to provide that here at school. When you're done with the lab, you're going to do a study guide, and the next time we meet, we will have a test. So please make sure that your notebook pages are up to date. So to go right over and review just a little bit for the test here, we started studying on page 64, and we talked about what are characteristics of living things. And we talked about that living things have to grow and develop, they have to be able to reproduce, they have to be able to have homeostasis, that stable internal environment despite the surroundings. They do respond to stimulus, and they have to satisfy their needs for energy, water, living space, and stable internal conditions. On page 65, we then went to talk about some scientists and how, when the microscope was invented, how they competed to come up with something called the cell theory, and that's what determines things are alive. And so the cell theory stated that all living things are made of cells. Cells are the basic unit of living things, and all cells are produced from other cells. So basically, microscopes helped prove that. On page 66, we talked about living things being made of cells, and that there are two kinds of living things: the single cell, unicellular, and multicellular organisms. And hopefully you had an example of unicellular organisms and 6 to 10 multicellular organisms, and you are going to give 3 different types of cells that make up a multicellular organism, like a muscle cell or a stomach cell or a tongue cell or a bone cell, something like that. They're all different if they're specialized. Then we looked at the basics of actual cell parts, and we talked about a cell wall and a cell membrane. We discussed the cell nucleus and the cytoplasm, and those 4 parts are the 4 parts of a cell you can actually really see well with a microscope. And so on page 69, we talked about all the cell parts and their functions. There's a much nicer table in our learning target diagram to have a peek at cell parts and what they do. And then on page 70, you had to be able to correctly label a plant cell. I drew this, by the way, so I tried to not make it too complicated. But look at a plant cell. It has a very large vacuole there. Okay. And then you were supposed to correctly label an animal cell. So you have labeled a plant cell and an animal cell. And then you compared your plant and animal cells here, and now you're just about ready to take the test. So when you're done looking at cells and comparing them, and finish your lab, then you need to start the study guide. And when you're done with the study guide, please listen to me go over it and then highlight, circle, put question marks so that you can ask me any questions you want to ask me before we actually take the test next session. All right, have a good afternoon. You have lots of work to do, so let's get to it.